Let's do it. It's happening. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas, the most suppressed show in the world. I don't know if I can actually prove that, but it's still very suppressed. Thank you for being here. We have big news around the world. This past weekend, the U.S. was responsible for an attack within Russia. Or were they? Let's get into that. Let's get into another terrorist attack that happened in Russia. Let's talk about Piers Morgan getting ripped limb from limb by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. If I were talking literally, that would be quite a spectacle, wouldn't it? Also, Israel using literal human shields. Have you ever noticed that Israel does everything they accuse enemies of doing? Just if they accuse someone of doing something, you can bet your goddamn entire bank account on the fact that Israel is in fact doing said thing. All of that and much more. Let's get into it. Click share, click subscribe, click thumbs up. Do it. So, Russia is blaming the U.S. for a deadly Ukrainian attack on occupied Crimea. Now, this is the way the Guardian phrases it, because the Guardian is doing Western propaganda mostly. But you notice they call it occupied Crimea, when in fact Crimea has been in Russian hands for years now, and there have been votes in Crimea that, by all analysis other than Western propaganda analysis, were legitimate votes that showed over 90% of the people wanted to be part of Russia. And culturally, most of Crimea is Russian. And so it's really Russian territory in those regards. But here's the thing. Here's the complicated thing. And I'm going to get into why it's a U.S. attack in just a second. But I've gotten off on this tangent, so we're sticking with it. You can't change horses mid-train track. That's how the expression goes, right? If you call it occupied Crimea, then why would Ukraine fire bombs into their own territory if they didn't view it as Russian territory? Why would they kill their own civilians? And yes, people died in this attack if they viewed it as Ukrainian territory. You wouldn't, like, if an enemy army came to the United States and took over, let's say, Pittsburgh, would we then fire American military armaments into Pittsburgh and just kill innocent civilians? Would that make a lot of sense? What would that do for us? How would that help? Unless you view that area as entirely being the enemy, entirely being Russian. So it doesn't even make sense to call it occupied territory. But Russia claimed on Sunday that the U.S. was responsible for Ukrainian attack on the Russian-annexed Crimean Peninsula. By the way, the entire U.S. is annexed. How about that? In which 5 U.S. supplied missiles that killed 4 people, including 2 children, and injured 151 more. That's a lot of injuries. U.S. specialists had set the ATACMS missiles. ATACMs. You'll see that name some more as we go through it. Flight coordinates on the basis of information from U.S. spy satellites, meaning Washington was directly responsible. The ministry said, and thank you, Dan, for the donation. Yes, thank you for getting us started. Goddamn right. And also 11th Hour for the donation for helping support this show. But okay, so I want to show you exactly what Russia said. So that was Guardian giving a little bit of the Western slant of what exactly went down. And let's see here. This is coming from Bricks Info. Russia says, quote, a deliberate terrorist missile attack was carried out on the city of Sevastopol by 5 American ATACMS missiles equipped with cluster warheads. And in case I need to remind anyone, cluster bombs are banned for use in war in most countries around the world, but the United States has been giving them to Ukraine to use on Russia. Because, if you're going to use weapons, why not go all out and commit war crimes, 4 U.S.-made ATACMS missiles were intercepted. The detonation of the fragmentation warhead of a 5th U.S.-made missile in midair resulted in numerous casualties Guardian said 151. 4 or 5 dead, 151 injured. All flight assignments for U.S. ATA CMS operational tactical missiles are entered by U.S. specialists based on the U.S. owned satellite intelligence data. So Russia is saying that it's not just, yes, thank you, 11th hour, for the donation. So Russia is saying it's not just that it's U.S. missiles, which we knew that the U.S. has been giving missiles to Ukraine for years now, but only recently did the U.S. say that Ukraine could start firing them into Russian territory, i.e. Crimea. But on top of that, you have U.S. military officials setting the coordinates. I mean, at what point do you just say this is a U.S. attack? Like how much does it have to be that the U.S. is involved for this to just be a U.S. attack? You've got U.S. personnel in Ukraine, which is a U.S. puppet government, after a U.S.-created coup in Ukraine, funded and armed by the U.S. Even New York Times said the CIA is on the Russian border, operating there. And then you have U.S. personnel putting in the coordinates. You have U.S.-made missiles being fired at U.S.-selected targets. At what point do you go, I think it might just be Americans. Thank you, Joshua, for the donation. Yes, I think I talked about Bogdan Sorotyuk, who's locked up in Ukrainian prison. I talked about him a week or two ago. And anyway, thank you, Josh, for the donation. So it's like, at what point do you just say this is the U.S. at war with Russia? And of course, this is insane. I mean, it's tough to say how insane this is. We are on the brink. We are tippy-toe looking over the edge of nuclear annihilation, or at least a nuclear exchange. And who knows how far that could go, right? A lot of enemies and adversaries and all those things have deals that if there's a nuclear exchange, then others fire their nukes, and then we just all kill each other, not to mention creating a nuclear winter, which, it's about 100 degrees here in Baltimore, so maybe nuclear winter's our last hope. Isn't that great? Aren't you just a big fan of the human race when we get to the point that nuclear winter starts to sound kind of nice? Of course, nuclear winter also means all the crops die, which I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a fan of crops. Kind of like them, But Doritos have no crops in them, right? There's no actual organic matter in a Dorito. So can we just live on Dorito chips and Twinkies? How does that work biologically, if someone's got the answer? But this is clearly it's just, how much does the U.S. have to be a part of an attack that's killing children with cluster munitions to just go, I think it's American. I think this is an American attack. And here is another few words from the Russian embassy. This is the Russian embassy in the UK. I bet they're treated well on the ground at the Russian embassy in the UK. They wrote, that is why Washington is mostly responsible, talking about putting in the coordinates and everything, mostly responsible for the deliberate missile strike at peaceful residents of Sevastopol. You know what sucks about my ability to mispronunciate, my ability to pronounce these words is even if I get them once, the next time I stumble upon the same word, I just get it wrong again. Even if I nail it down, I'll go, oh, Sevastopol. Then next time I see it, I'll go, what is that word? It's just how my brain works. I'm not that smart, really. By delivering this weaponry to Ukraine, as well as the Kiev regime, from the territory of which the strike was launched, such actions are not going to be left unanswered. And need I remind you that Russia has now sent battleships to Cuba, which is about 12 feet from the Russian coast. And can you really blame them when the U.S. has lined up everything on the Russian border and is now firing weapons into Russian territory? At what point do you go, I kind of see what they're doing there? I kind of, not that I'm a fan. I don't want nuclear war. I don't want to see this insanity continue from these goddamn sociopaths. See, another thing that I don't know if it needs any kind of reminder, But like what? I'll let you decide on the percentage. 99%, 98% of humans are like good people without access to ballistic missiles who just want to help people and be nice and get along in our lives. It's like most people. And yet we're controlled by the lunatics, the absolute sociopaths. There's no moral core there. There's no understanding of others. There's no care for the children that just died in Crimea in these bombs. There's no care for the hundreds of thousands that have died in this war in Ukraine that was provoked by the U.S. More on that in a moment. Actually, let's just go straight to that now. That's kind of part of what is talked about in this clip of Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, he perhaps is the person who has most made a career out of just being wrong. And then, there's many others who are wrong all the time, Bill O'Reilly and Anderson Cooper and everyone else. But being wrong and having that told to their face that they're fucking idiots and proven to them by people who are far smarter on these things. Sorry, I keep saying them, proven to him by people that are far smarter on these things. And his whole career is just clip after clip of him being schooled for being a goddamn moron on he just spouts Western propaganda, pro-Israel propaganda, and then gets just laminated in truth that makes him look like a moron. And yet that's his whole career. He does it again the following day. It's unbelievable that you can be so wrong. And he's wrong while seeming indignant and talking down to his guest, who then educates him on how the world works. It's a bizarre, sad. That's a sad man. It'd be like someone who made their entire MMA career by just having their face punched in. Like every fight they got into, they just lost all their teeth and they're blacked out in the first 12 seconds. And yet somehow they keep getting paid to do it. It's as if people just tuned in to see them get obliterated. And you're like, wow, he's doing it again today. Dan asked, you mean the guy from Britain's Got Talent? I think he was on Britain's Got Talent for a long time. But he also had a CNN show for years that tells you a lot about CNN. Anyway, just sad sack of potatoes. Keep it clean for the kids. Anyway, here he is talking to Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor Jeffrey Sachs is from Columbia University, and he's awesome. He's based. He's right on just about everything, at least nowadays. I don't know how it was 20 years ago, but anyway. So we'll see how much of this we get through, but it's pretty great.
You seem very reliant on accepting Putin's worldview rather than perhaps the stark reality of the barbarism with which he's executed this war.
And of course, I'll play the response where he gets schooled. But I just want to say that this is a common trick used in these interviews, used by Piers Morgan, used by people when I go on with people that want to attack me, is if you are speaking the truth, if you are relaying what actually is happening in the actual real world, then they go, well, boy, Putin would like to hear that. This was used against, Janine Garofalo when she'd go on Fox News before the Second Iraq War, 2002, 2003, and they'd go, I bet Saddam Hussein loves you. It's a pathetic, sad talking point to try and get people to stop undermining Western propaganda. And anyway, let's watch how thoroughly Jeffrey Sachs destroys it.
You seem very reliant on accepting Putin's worldview rather than perhaps the stark reality of the barbarism with which he's executed this war.
Yeah, maybe because I know too much about the United States, because the first war in Europe after World War II was the U.S. bombing of Belgrade for 78 days to change borders of a European state. The idea was to break Serbia, to create Kosovo as an enclave, and then to install Bondesteel, which is the largest NATO base in the Balkans, in the Southwest Balkans. So the U.S. started this under Clinton, that we will break the borders, we will illegally bomb another country. We didn't have any UN authority. This was a, quote, NATO mission to do that. Then I know the United States went to war repeatedly, illegally, in what it did in Afghanistan, and then what it did in Iraq, and then what it did in Syria, which was the Obama administration, especially Obama and Hillary Clinton, tasking the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, and then what it did with NATO illegally bombing Libya to topple Muammar Gaddafi, and then what it did in Kiev in February 2014. I happened to see some of that with my own eyes. The U.S. overthrew Yanukovych together with right-wing Ukrainian military forces. We overthrew a president. And what's interesting, by the way, is we overthrew Yanukovych the day after the European Union representatives had reached an agreement with Yanukovych to have early elections, a government of national unity, and a stand down of both sides. That was agreed. The next thing that happens is the opposition, quote unquote, says we don't agree. They stormed the government buildings and they deposed Yanukovych. And within hours, the United States says, yes, we support the new government. It didn't say, oh, we had an agreement. That's unconstitutional what you did. So we overthrew a government, contrary to a promise that the European Union had made. And by the way, Russia, the United States, and the EU were parties to that agreement. And the United States, an hour afterwards, backed the coup. Okay, so everyone's got a little bit to answer for. In 2015, the Russians did not say, we want the Donbass back. They said peace should come through negotiations. And negotiations between the ethnic Russians in the east of Ukraine and this new regime in Kiev led to the Minsk II agreement. The Minsk II agreement was voted by the UN Security Council unanimously. It was signed by the government of Ukraine. It was guaranteed explicitly by Germany and France. And you know what? And it's been explained to me in person. It was laughed at inside the US government. This is after the UN Security Council unanimously accepted it.
So he goes on to talk about how the Minsk agreement was laughed at because the U.S. and Ukraine and Germany never intended to abide by it. So basically, they signed this peace deal with Russia. They then secretly, behind closed doors, say we're never doing any of that, and they used it to spend the time before Russia came to the realization that the Minsk agreement would not be held up. They use that time to heavily arm Ukraine, to basically prep for the war they have created with Ukraine. And thank you, Margot, for the donation. Really appreciate it. And Margot brings up the BlackRock connections to Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine is being sold off to BlackRock and others. BlackRock's kind of at the head of it. And actually, I brought to you a segment recently about how Ukraine, the U.S. and Western corporations have actually stolen more of Ukraine since this war began than Russia now claims of Ukraine, because those large, massive corporations with amount of money that is 10 times the GDP of Ukraine, maybe 50 times, they've bought up so many areas of Ukraine as Ukraine continues to privatize, which is a nice word for sell off all their assets. So in those ways, the West has actually stolen more of Ukraine than Russia has taken during this war. But Jeffrey Sachs, as you see there, is absolutely speaking truth. He just obliterates Piers Morgan, and yet Piers Morgan has the gall to introduce this question with, why is it you love to spout Putin talking points? And every day Piers Morgan is schooled like this, it seems, because there's a new viral clip every day of just how dumb this man is. And yet he just does it. He keeps doing it because it goes viral. That's what our media has become, is this just absolute shit show. Thank goodness there's people like Jeffrey Sachs to school people like Piers Morgan. Here's a quote from Chomsky. This is from Media Lens posted this, but it's Chomsky on the war in Ukraine. And too bad Chomsky is not able to speak over the past year due to a stroke. But anyway, he said, This is since the war in Ukraine began. He said, of course it was provoked, meaning the war in Ukraine. Otherwise, they wouldn't refer to it all the time as an unprovoked invasion, which here's the thing. Once you start to understand Chomsky's sense of humor and Chomsky's sarcasm, reading his stuff actually becomes quite funny. It's, because he is such a serious person, he doesn't exactly have the comedic delivery down. But I just love the statement, of course it's unprovoked, because if it were anything else than that, they wouldn't keep referring to it as provoked. Like anytime the U.S. propaganda keeps saying unprovoked, Putin's unprovoked invasion, it's unprovoked, then you go, I think there might have been a provocation. I think there might have been some provoking. I think there might have been some provoking the bear. See what I did there with the word poking? We've been provoking the bear. So, and he's absolutely right. The reason you set up propaganda like that, where you go unprovoked, is if you are fighting the reality, which is absolutely provoked. So he continues. He goes, by now, censorship in the United States has reached such a level beyond anything in my lifetime. That's pretty incredible considering Chomsky's 95 years old. This is worse propaganda than he's seen in his lifetime. He says, such a level that you are not permitted to read the Russian position. Literally, Americans are not allowed to know what the Russians are saying. And by the way, to that point, you can look at how our mainstream media and our government went apeshit when Tucker Carlson went to interview Putin. And here's the thing. There's a bunch about Tucker Carlson I despise, but in that regard, he's absolutely right. We should all be talking to Putin. We should find out what these people, what world leaders everywhere want. We should hear regularly from them. We should learn what it is they want and how it is they're behaving. But the U.S. government can't let you know that, because that will change your worldview. You will stop thinking that only other countries do the bad things, and the U.S. is just always here going, oh, no, it happened to us again. Gee willikers. That was also one of my favorite things about the West Wing, the TV show. I don't like to admit it, but back before I woke up, I enjoyed the West Wing. I would watch the West Wing TV show by Aaron Sorkin. And one of my favorite ways that they basically created propaganda in the West Wing was that the TV show is that everything just happened to the United States. The United States, even when the United States made a mistake, sometimes the U.S. would kill a child or something, and they had to figure out how to deal with it, a child. And they had to figure out how to do. Even when the U.S. would make mistakes, it was because of something that happened to the U.S. We got attacked. The terrorists did this. So-and-so did that. Russia did this. China did this. It was never the U.S. acting on anyone first. The U.S. might respond, but it was the U.S. always just getting attacked in one way or another, and we had to figure out how to deal with it. And that's what the propaganda tells us, right? The U.S. never is the provoker. We're never provoking the bear. We're always just standing here going, oh, no, Russia invaded Ukraine. What do we do? To continue from Chomsky, he goes, Americans are not allowed to know what the Russians are saying, except selected things. So if Putin makes a speech to Russians with all kinds of outlandish claims about Peter the Great and so on, then you see it on the front pages, the stuff that can be called outlandish. If the Russians make an offer for a negotiation, meaning with Ukraine, you can't find it. Never mentioned. Same with Israel and ceasefires right now, right? We hear, it's Hamas holding up the ceasefire. Hamas has said yes to plenty of versions of the ceasefire, and Israel just will never say yes because Israel wants to continue their ethnic cleansing. Chomsky continues, if Russians make an offer for negotiation, you can't find it. That's suppressed. You're not allowed to know what they are saying. I have never seen a level of censorship like this. Again, pretty incredible coming from a guy who's studied, I was going to say nothing but politics, but he's actually a linguistics scholar as well. But he's 95 years old, and he's been studying this shit for 95 years. And he's saying this is the most censorship he's ever seen. So to go back about how provoked, just to throw a little more fuel on the fire in terms of how provoked this the war in Ukraine has been. And for those of you who joined a little late, at the top of this, I talked about how the U.S. has supplied, targeted, and aimed U.S. missiles, cluster munitions into Russian territory. And as far as I know, this is the first use of American weaponry aimed into and killing Russians on Russian territory, pushing us dangerously close to U.S.-Russian exchange. And these megalomaniacal sociopaths they won't stop. They won't pause. They won't. But to go back to just how provoked this was, here's John McCain, war criminal, your favorite war criminal, the war criminal you love to love, you hated to love, you love to hate. I don't know. Here he is in 2013. So this is before the Maidan coup. This is John McCain in Ukraine before they have brought down the president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, before they have taken him out and put I was going to say Nazis in power, but let's say Nazi-fueled group in power. This is 2013. John McCain in Ukraine.
Joining me now, Senator John McCain, who I know, Senator, you have just addressed the crowd of protesters there yourself in Kiev. What is it you're trying to do here?
Hopefully what we're trying to do is bring about a peaceful transition here that would stop the violence, would give the Ukrainian people what they unfortunately have not, with different revolutions that have taken place, a real legitimate society. This is a grassroots revolution here. It's been peaceful except for when the government tried to crack down on them, and the government hasn't done that since. But praising their ability and their desire to demonstrate peacefully for change that I think they deserve.
He keeps saying, so to go back to what Chomsky said, McCain keeps saying peacefully. If McCain keeps saying peacefully, this is before the protest became quite violent. I mean, there was a lot of violence eventually. But if McCain keeps saying peacefully, what does that actually mean? That means behind the scenes, U.S. doing some not peaceful shit. That's the only reason you keep saying peacefully. You keep saying peacefully if you're trying to refute the reality on the ground. The U.S. had been funding, arming, and to some degree directing neo-Nazi forces in Ukraine. And as I brought to you multiple times, even the New York Times this year admitted, just a few months ago, admitted that the CIA was training, arming, and funding Ukrainian groups on the border of Russia, in the forest on the border of Russia, and sending them into Russia. But peacefully, right? McCain says peacefully.
Let me ask you this about the U.S. role. I know that you have wanted the administration perhaps to consider sanctions, something to help boost the anti-government protesters. Question to you is, while we're trying to work on so many things with the Russians, for instance, with Iran and in Syria, is this really a good time for the U.S. to be taking on Russia?
Well, I don't think that we would be taking on Russia. And by the way, I am very pleased with Secretary Kerry's statement.
I don't think we would be taking on Russia. The whole point was to take on Russia. The whole point of this thing is to take on Russia.
Our Deputy Secretary Victoria Nuland, who was here. Look, these people love the United States of America. They love freedom. And I don't think you could view this as anything but our traditional support for people who want a free and democratic society.
That's right. Anytime there's a peaceful protest against a government anywhere in the world, John McCain or other senators will show up on the front porch and help you out. Anytime, right? Is that true? Or is it specifically in countries we're trying to turn against our adversaries? It's specifically Iran, specifically Ukraine, specifically Taiwan. Those are the places, Venezuela, that we go running to. And we're there swinging a flag. Freedom, The moment one dude shows up with a poster, we're there. We're like, can we give you $1 million and help you out? $1 million and some guns? Thank you. 11th Hour for the donation. Again, appreciate it. 11th Hour mentions War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. Yes, everyone should read that. Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in U.S. history, but he then had a come to Jesus moment later in life where he toured the country in the early to mid 1900s, telling the country how much the U.S. was a racket, how much he and his fellow troops were used to actually benefit corporations and corporate control of countries. So if you don't know his name, you should. At one point, Smedley Butler's, I don't remember whether it was grandkid or great-grandkid, emailed me to thank me for keeping his name in the news because, they in the family are proud of Smedley Butler's efforts to undo what he had used to be a part of, which was the U.S. military-industrial complex. Let's just finish up this clip real quick.
We're not talking about military action. We're not talking about blockades. We are talking about the possibility of sanctions if they continue to brutally repress their people. That would require some action on our part, just because that's what the United States of America is all about.
Join.
What's the U.S. all about again there, Johnny boy? Death and destruction. That's what the U.S. is about. Death and destruction. Okay. I have some interesting new details about Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar coming up. I have some, I don't even know what to call it. I guess awful news, but predictable news about Israel. Everyone, please take a second. Take 1 second of your time. What do I have to do to get 1 second of your time? And click the thumbs up, whatever platform you're on. Click the share button, click the subscribe, and then you got to click the bell icon. We are heavily suppressed. The numbers on YouTube keep going down because apparently I'm not doing a good job. Or is it that they don't want this news getting out to you? But anyway, thank you for all of you who are supporting this show and supporting the efforts to continue this show, Dangerous Ideas. By the way, if you join up at leecamp.net, my locals page, you will get my ebook over there, Dangerous Ideas. You will, once you join up, you'll get it for free. You will get my Zoom comedy special, Laughing All the Way to the Shitstorm. I'll send you a private link to that. You will get these live streams whenever you want them, whereas they disappear after a day or two for everyone else. You will get special segments all the time. Loads of stuff if you join up at leecamp.net. And out of all that, the real thing you'll get is to support this show. Thank you, Margot, for the donation. Yes, solidarity. Margot says, please talk about the U.S. Congress laundering money using Ukraine as a tool. Well, I think I have talked about that a fair amount. That goes with all of our military efforts, all of our ongoing war efforts. I've called the Pentagon the largest money laundering scheme in U.S. history. Or not U.S. history, world history, because we're talking about trillions of dollars that kind of gets collected from the U.S. taxpayer. Part of it gets collected from the U.S. taxpayer, but a lot of it is just printed because we can print all the dollars we want because of the petrodollar. More on that coming up in a moment. All hail the R.I.P. the petrodollar. We had such good times together. But that money is collected, whichever way. Maybe it's printed out, whatever. It's collected, and then it's washed and it's scrubbed in something that says national security, Pentagon, Ukraine war, Afghanistan, Iraq, and they scrub it, and then they hand it back to weapons contractors, back to the richest people in the world, back to the blood-covered maniacs that are running this show. And that's why it is one of the largest money laundering schemes in human history, or the largest money laundering scheme in human history. So thank you, Margot, for reminding me to mention that again. And I just want to give this a short mention. I don't have, sometimes the details on these things take a day or two to come out. This is very recent. Also in Russia, there was a terror attack. Now they say on a synagogue, but it's also on a cathedral. Yeah. So it's not just a synagogue. So I assume some people would like to call it anti-Semitic, but it seems like there's more going on than that. Terror attack on a synagogue, churches in Russia's Dagestan region. And it's tough to know who's to blame. There's been how many dozens killed? There are, there's a lot of theories floating around right now. Some say Ukraine, some say Chechens, some say that it's being done by Mossad. Even if there was an attack on a synagogue, it's being the U.S. is furious at Russia for the U.S. and Israel are furious at Russia for not siding with Israel in their genocide. It's tough to know at this point, but we do know that the last attack, the one that killed 133 people in Moscow's Crocus City Hall at a concert just 3 months ago, we do know that one was the people taking credit for it was ISIS-K, which is a cereal. I don't know if you knew that. So I don't know how a breakfast cereal could kill that many people. It must have gone bad. No, kidding. ISIS-K is a part of ISIS, but if you actually look them up, the leader, one of the leaders of ISIS-K was this is even in Wikipedia, but they've since purged it from Wikipedia. They've taken an eraser to Wikipedia immediately after this happened. He was a regular at Bagram Air Base, the U.S. Air Base in Afghanistan, and he was a security person there. He also was the head of security for Afghanistan's vice president, who was known as the CIA's man in Afghanistan. So I don't know what you want to take from that needed to be scrubbed from Wikipedia. You can use the Wayback Machine. I've pulled it up multiple times. You use the Wayback Machine and see that it used to say that the head of ISIS-K was a regular at the U.S. Bagram Air Force Base. Anyway, maybe we'll have more details about that terror attack in Russia coming up soon in the coming days. But I want to move over to Israel for a minute before we get to a little new information on petrodollar in Saudi Arabia. And it connects to 9/11. Anyway, Israel has been caught using literal human shields, like not just locating their headquarters, their IDF, not just locating those things within civilian populations, which they are. In Israel, their IDF bases are within civilian populations. So they're using human shields in that regard, which is what they accuse Hamas of all the time. But no, this is strapping injured Palestinians. I mean, it's so disgusting. I can't even barely get out the sentence. But there's video that's been circulating, that's been confirmed, of them strapping injured Palestinians to the front of their Jeeps alive so that people won't shoot or bomb their Jeeps, which is literal human shields. It's a war crime, but it also hilariously is exactly what Israel accuses Hamas of constantly, and yet the only video we have of actual human shields is Israel doing it. And also Rod, who has been doing great work on posting about our garbage media, she goes, the mainstream media, Western media, has been talking for months about human shields, and yet when Israel does it, they somehow forget the words human shields. So this is mainstream media. Reuters says Israeli forces strap wounded Palestinians to Jeep during raid. Sounds like a human shield, doesn't it? CNN says Israeli military straps injured Palestinian man to the hood of a Jeep. Wow, that sure does sound like a human shield. This is Sky News. Israeli soldiers strapped injured Palestinian to a Jeep after West Bank arrest raid. Boy, that sounds like a human shield. BBC News. Israeli army strapped wounded Palestinian to Jeep. Man, that sounds a lot like a human shield. So suddenly our mainstream media forgets the phrase human shield the moment it's Israel doing it. It's just gone from their vocabulary. They don't even know what you're talking about. They have no idea. But of course, this is horrific, and it is Israel literally using human shields. And I just think, keep getting the word out there that anytime Israel says Hamas is doing something, that means they're doing it. When Israel says Hamas is not agreeing to the ceasefire, it's Israel not agreeing to the ceasefire. When Israel says Hamas is using human shields, it's Israel not using using human shields. When Israel says Hamas has taken hostages, which they have, but Israel has 10,000 hostages. So Hamas taking, they now have 100 some hostages. Well, and perhaps it's far lower than that due to Israeli bombing has killed many, but they have 100 some, and Israel has 10,000 hostages. When they talk about using sexual assault, sexual violence as a weapon, that's one of the things that Israel and the U.S. propaganda has been spouting over and over again. Well, we're now getting more and more evidence of Israeli efforts and IDF efforts to use sexual assault as a weapon. I've brought you some of those reports, but it is ongoing that Israel is using rape largely on men as a weapon against them, as a form of torture. And so just anytime, it's a good way, it's a nice, easy way to be able to read the news and understand what's going on. Anytime you see Israel or U.S. propaganda accusing Palestinians of something, you just know to scratch out the word Palestinians and put Israelis, and you'll have the truth. So that's convenient, at least, right? Easy to figure out that way. But we all, I love to see you all here, to the thousands of you watching live and the tens of thousands of you that will watch later. It helps me keep going and keep talking about this and keep getting it out there. And I know you guys are as well. And the fight continues to end this genocide, to stop this genocide. And Yanis Varoufakis, who's always doing great stuff, the former Greek, was he the finance minister? I don't mean he was formerly Greek. I mean, he's currently Greek. He's still Greek. He didn't shake that. But the leftist in Greek who has been attacked, he was beaten thoroughly for basically standing up for everything that's right in the world. But anyway, he tweeted out this, and I wanted to read it to you. He said, "Tell them we did not live silent. We lit up the sky. We laughed. We took care of each other. Tell them we were broken. But we did not live silent. We reached the impossible, and it was impossible. If I die, tell them we did not live silent. We sang, we taught, we learned, we grew, we messed with each other, we danced, and we danced. We made it work. We prayed for each other. We cried. We held each other. But tell them we did not live silent. We resisted and resisted and resisted and resisted. We bled and we stretched each other up, stitched each other up. We leaned on each other. We fed each other. Tell them we did not live silent. We told stories at night. We rode at dawn. We ran for our lives. We swam for our lives. We risked it all. We never gave up till the last breath. Tell them we did not live silent, and we died free." I don't know if that's by him. It's beautiful. I don't know if it's by him, or maybe you guys know if that's coming from someone else. He doesn't say it's from someone else, but beautiful poem by Yanis Varoufakis saying, or posted by him at least, saying we did not live silent. I'm being told from Roberto, one of my producers, that it is, or yeah, okay. Anyway, he's telling me that it's from a Palestinian, but maybe in this video it says, because there's a video that goes with it. But anyway, beautiful, beautiful words. And you can look that up on Yanis Varoufakis's Twitter account if you can spell it. Good luck with that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's part of what keeps me going. Is part of what is keeping me going is the fact that you can't live silent. You can't. It's just garbage to sit there and not fight back at all, not spread the word, not continue the fight. And there's a lot of ways to fight. You know, many of you are protesting in the streets. Many of you are talking to family and friends and trying to get them to understand. Many of you are reposting stuff. But here's another one of the many ways to fight, because I talked about who we should be boycotting. I've done multiple segments on who we should be boycotting, who we should the companies, the corporations that are funding and helping Israel continue their genocidal apartheid regime. But here's another one, the No Thanks app. I feel like I might have mentioned it before, actually, on this show. I'm almost certain I did, but the No Thanks app calls for a boycott of Israel-related products. And as far as I know, you can download this on most app stores. I don't think they've banned it, but it has thousands. It was created by a Palestinian, and it has thousands of products that you basically can just scan the product, and it'll tell you if it's supporting Israel and supporting their genocidal actions. It'll tell you which ones to boycott. And it seems like a pretty great app for that. I've heard a lot of people appreciating that they can use it. And, you know, they talk about how that includes such products as Coca-Cola, Nescafe. I did a video on the 10 worst companies connected to Israel, things like Starbucks, McDonald's. But I'm sure, I know there are 1,000 more. So this is just a tiny, tiny dose. Okay, and thank you all of you so supporting the show. Oh, I should also mention before I get to a kind of a little update on petrodollar and the end of the petrodollar. Someone else is saying boycott app is another one that you can use. Thank you, Randy, for that. Before I get to the next segment, Los Angeles. If you're in Los Angeles, if you're near Los Angeles, if you've heard of Los Angeles, I'll be coming to perform in Los Angeles July 11th at 8 p.m. at the Crow. We'll be doing stand-up comedy to open the show, then taping a live episode of my podcast, Government Secrets. You're going to have a good time. It's going to be a great show. We'll get to hang out. And those tickets are at my website, leecamp.com, which will, you can then click the schedule tab and you'll get the tickets there. You could probably also look up the Crow Comedy Club in Los Angeles. I think it's in Santa Monica. But yeah, July 11th, Los Angeles. And I don't get to perform live much. You know, it used to be I was always announcing tours once every 6 months or so. But they have suppressed me to such an extent that it is quite difficult for me to let people know in a specific city that I'm coming there. And so that's part of the reason that I don't do it nearly as much. But July 11th, Los Angeles. If you have friends there that you think would enjoy it, hope you'll let them know. Okay. So I saw this. There were a couple of these posts about Saudi Arabia, and I mean recently. I know we've seen posts in the past, but just recently about Saudi Arabia being involved in 9/11. And here's what kind of caught my attention was this is CBS. This is 60 Minutes. This is the most mainstream U.S. war machine propaganda you could imagine. 60 Minutes on the CBS. And they're doing a segment just the other day about how much Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11. Investigators for 9/11 families examined video taken by a man with ties to Saudi intelligence referencing a plan. So there's this video. There's this video that he basically, this is back in the, late 90s, early 2000, where he took a VHS camera or whatever and walked around videotaping the Capitol building and other areas and their security and how exactly what could be done. And this guy had connections to Saudi intelligence. And so my immediate question is, why would the U.S. propaganda machine be involved in revealing connections between Saudi Arabia and 9/11 after they have covered it up for so many years? The 80, was it 80? Yeah. Oh yeah. The 80 redacted pages. The 80 redacted pages was a lot in the 9/11 Commission report, which was all garbage. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Goddamn right. The the 80 redacted pages from the 9/11 Commission report, they eventually revealed it several years ago, or some of it. And a lot of it had to do with Saudi Arabia, all these connections to Saudi Arabia, all this stuff. And it's like, why would U.S. mainstream media, thank you, Jay Blue, why would U.S. mainstream media be talking about Saudi Arabia? Clearly, if you hear them revealing stuff about Saudi Arabia connected to 9/11, that our so-called close ally was the cause or part of the cause of the largest attack that the U.S. has seen in recent years, then something must be going on with Saudi Arabia to start going after Saudi Arabia. Don't forget, Saudi Arabia has so much immunity from U.S. critique that they were able to grab up and execute and chop up and throw into a barbecue pit a Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, and the U.S. still didn't do anything. Thank you, Sherry, for the big donation. Love it. Appreciate you keeping this show going. And yet here is the mainstream media all of a sudden turning on Saudi Arabia. So it begs the question. Oh, and one more thing. Let me just throw this in here. You got to remember to what extent the U.S. went to protect Saudi Arabia after 9/11. This is also from CBS in the days after the Bin Laden family in 2001. The Bin Laden family was flown out of the country in days when there were no flights in the air. These are days when 0 U.S. flights are in the air, right? All flights were grounded, 100%, except if you were in the Bin Laden family. Now, the reason was not that this was, Bin Laden is a large family. And Osama bin Laden was apparently, or we're told, was the brains behind 9/11. Now, much of the bin Laden family is Saudi Arabian, and they're big oil oligarchs, and they had close connections to George W. Bush. And anyway, all these bin Ladens are in the United States, and they're flown out of the country in a day when planes are not allowed to be in the air. How close do you have to be with the U.S. government and the FBI to get flights out of the country on days when no flights are allowed in the air? That's really, tell me that. So then you have fast forward to now, you have mainstream media saying, oh yeah, Saudi Arabia totally planned and perpetrated 9/11. Why would the mainstream media, the U.S. empire's bullhorn, go after Saudi Arabia right now like this? Well, again, as I brought to you last week, it's the petrodollar. This is basically the U.S. is taking the gloves off because they are now furious at Saudi Arabia for not renewing the petrodollar deal. There is some debate as to whether it was a $50 petro deal or whether it has been an ongoing petro deal that's kind of re-signed. And I brought to you how most mainstream media, well, actually, mainstream media wasn't covering it at all, except for one article in NASDAQ that I saw that said petrodollar had been dropped. But now there's a mainstream media article saying, oh no, that's fake news. Chad's asking about Israeli products to boycott, and I don't know the list, Chad. I recommend you just, I know one that's very popular is, what's it called? Saba hummus? Is it Saba? The most popular hummus in the U.S. is Israeli. But I recommend you grab one of those apps because I don't have those answers about which products which Israeli products to boycott. Thank you, Adrian, for the donation. Yes, Adrian, I covered that as well. Adrian's asking, where did the towers go? And I didn't know this part until recently. The towers, the amount of, I don't remember the numbers, but whatever it is, crazy amount of tonnage of steel. You see pieces were given to certain areas in order to create monuments. And I saw one just the other day. I can't remember where I was. Maybe somewhere in Baltimore. But so pieces of the towers are all over. They're scattered. They're in other countries. And I'm talking small pieces, or the biggest, 20 feet tall. But generally, we're talking 5 feet tall. Pieces of the tower all over these places. Outside of those pieces, all of the rest was not analyzed, never been touched. It was just like taken to landfills and cut down into tiny pieces and taken to landfill. It was just like, it was kind of like the cars that were shot up at the Nova Music Festival, where Israel has stated that they shredded and buried the cars in an undisclosed location. All of the crazy amount of tons and tons and tons, I don't remember the number, of steel, and it just disappeared into landfills. And it was so much that they created a special center, I believe in Long Island, or was it Staten Island? Sabra Hummus. Sorry, thank you. Sabra Hummus. They created a special facility, like the size of, whatever number of 3 football fields or something, where they just brought the ruins of the towers and disposed of them in a secrecy, in a place that no one could go and look at them, which is kind of insane. Let's see. I'm being told bdsmovement.net. You can get the list of what to boycott. So go to bdsmovement.net/get-involved/what to boycott. I'm not going to put that into the chat because I'll probably get banned for putting that into the chat or something. Okay. So to get back to why is our mainstream media now turning on Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia, and this one actually is in the mainstream media. I was actually surprised that mainstream media finally basically realized, I guess they had certain areas of mainstream media realized they had to cover the fact the petrodollar deal is just about over. And this is Yahoo Finance, very mainstream outlet. And they're reposting Business Insider. It says how a Saudi pullback from a landmark U.S. deal would be bad news for dollar dominance. Saudi Arabia is moving away from the U.S. dollar in the oil trade as it looks at alternative markets. The end of a long-standing petrodollar agreement would dent dollar dominance, the Atlantic Council wrote. So the Atlantic Council is a U.S. empire think tank. They are only going to say things that either help the U.S. empire or is a truth that they can't avoid, and they have to reveal the truth about, they have to say something about it. And this seems to be one of those cases. The Atlantic Council has written that the end of the long-standing petro agreement. And so for this to be fake news, you'd have to have the Atlantic Council lying about it, which the Atlantic Council would never admit the petrodollar deal was over if it weren't over. The move would be a sign that Saudi Arabia is instead seeking to diversify trade, which all elements have shown that. Thank you, Anya. If I'm pronouncing that right, or is it Anja? Could you eviscerate John Oliver for his lib fear-mongering take on elections, por favor? I have not seen it, but that is a good idea. I should do that. I have eviscerated John Oliver for other things in the past, despite the fact that I would have never called him a friend. I only probably was in the same room as him 4 times, but we were friendly. Both stand-up comedians. He was in New York for a while. I performed on the same show with him twice, I think, at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It was like an assortment of comedians. It wasn't like just me and him. But as I became more aware as to what exactly is going on in the world, and I became more aware as to what exactly John Oliver was doing, the thing is, when it's outside of foreign policy, he would do similar episodes to what I would do at Redacted Tonight. I mean, he and I both went after the police and civil asset forfeiture within 2 weeks of each other. I actually think his writers are probably watching my show and getting ideas. But anyway, going after corporations, revealing the harm that these corporate entities are able to do, such as Dollar Store, etc. But when it comes to foreign policy, it's just like U.S. propaganda. And that is just the sad case. Anyway, Anya, I'll try and look up what John Oliver's up to and get back to you. Thank you, Kelly, for the donation. Thank you for keeping this show going. Okay. let me get back to mainstream media is now, at least some of it, admitting that the petrodollar deal has just ended, which at first they weren't saying anything about it. At first they were trying to cover it up. At first they were saying it's fake news. And now you have Yahoo Finance saying it is not fake news. So there you go. There you go, folks. But this is another way to help with media literacy, how you should watch your media. When you see main U.S. propaganda outlets like CBS suddenly flip and go after a country that has long been an ally, that has long been important to the U.S., and suddenly say, oh, wow, looks like the Saudi Arabia committed 9/11. When you see that, your first question should be, why have they flipped? Why has the U.S. propaganda suddenly decided to go after Saudi Arabia? Oh, they're not on the petrodollar anymore. They're not on the thing that gives the U.S. dollar power. Now, there is a second thing that gives the U.S. dollar power, which is global reserve currency. However, those two things are linked. As the petrodollar numbers go down, the reserve currency numbers go down. Sherry asks, what about Jon Stewart? Yeah, Jon Stewart's the same on foreign policy, with the exception he's a little better on Palestine here or there. I've seen some clips where he was more willing to call out Israel than maybe most people on television. But, Jon Stewart is one of those where it's, and I hope you guys find this interesting for me to talk about this, but because I know a lot of you are asking about this. But Jon Stewart is one of those where he'll have some great analysis that gets down to a certain level, but he'll never go deeper. He'll never get into the deep machinations of capitalism and inverted totalitarianism and petrodollar and global reserve currency. And so it always leaves you wanting. Like if you're just waking up, Jon Stewart might be a good kind of what's the goddamn term? Gateway. I was like, gateway drug. The good gateway drug for someone who's just waking up to start to figure it out. But then you got to go beyond Jon Stewart. You got to get to Chris Hedges. You got to get to this amazing show right here. You got to get to my books, my incredibly important books, Dangerous Ideas and Bullet Points and Punchlines. And once you've read those, you can stop reading all other books because those are the books. You've figured out all there is to know, and then you can move on with your life. Thank you, Christian, for the donation. Christian says, Lee, you're trying to tell me mommy doesn't want us playing with Saudis anymore. I salute you. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. Okay, let's see. I'm going to be wrapping up in a minute, but I thought I'd bring you one more segment. Kovar says Jon Stewart is pure propaganda. Well, I didn't say he's he's great. I said he's a good gateway drug. What's another good example of a good gateway drug? There are many. Evelyn wants to know if my books are in the UK. So probably not in stores. Bullet Points and Punchlines you can get delivered to the UK. I believe the publisher of Bullet Points and Punchlines has a facility in the UK, so it shouldn't be $1 million, I don't think. But Bullet Points and Punchlines does come in paperback or hardback, whereas Dangerous Ideas, which is the image right there on screen, is there is no hard copy. I never created a hard copy because it was not a lot of call for a hard copy. People were getting the ebook, and I give people the ebook if you sign up at leecamp.net. So I haven't put out a hard copy yet. Okay, I wanted to bring you one more segment, but you can keep asking questions, and if I see them, I'll try and answer. But anyway, I brought you a segment last week about how China has cured, at least anecdotally, but it's been peer reviewed, has cured diabetes in a long-term diabetes sufferer. And the U.S. has no interest in it. It does not want to learn how to cure diabetes. And it's something like 1 out of 10 Americans. It's a crazy number of Americans have diabetes. Because we manufacture diabetes. Hell yeah. So here's another article talking about, and this is an article written in China about how there's now a threat of sanctions on China, basically for curing diabetes. And the article says, why would the U.S. want to sanction something that is clearly beneficial to all of humanity? The reason is simple: money. And I know this is not shocking to you, but to some of these readers, this is shocking. The U.S. has over 300 million people, of which around 34 million are diabetics. So yeah, 10%. Many of whom rely on insulin injections to maintain a normal, even life-sustaining existence. In China, insulin is not an expensive medication. A vial can cost anywhere from a few dozen to 100 yuan, and the monthly cost for most diabetics is only 100 or 200 yuan. But in the U.S., the price of insulin was at least 10 times higher, with the cheapest vial costing $275. So 100 yuan is like $13. Is that what I looked up? Yeah. So in China, a vial of insulin would cost $13. In the US, it'd be $275. That's without insurance. But of course, if you're paying for insurance, you've also got to count those costs in because you're paying for insurance. But many people don't have insurance. So $275 versus $13. Now, in the US, does it cost more to produce insulin? Nope. In the US, is it just that insulin is really hard to come by and that's why it's so expensive? Nope. It's just that they want to enrich themselves. Our garbage healthcare system, our garbage insurance companies, garbage big pharma want to enrich themselves. And that's why a vial of insulin is $275. U.S. President Kamala Harris said that 1 in 4 American diabetics could not afford insulin. The price of insulin, and that's one of those big talk things from Democrats. Kamala Harris is talking about it. Oh yeah, well then why haven't you done anything about it? The only state that's done anything about it is, although Biden did talk about changing, making some sort of cap on insulin costs. I don't think it's been done yet, has it? But here's the thing: is let's see. Biden's cap on the cost of insulin. What Biden sees 35 price cap for insulin as pivotal campaign issue. Oh, so he's not doing it now, but he'll think about doing it if you reelect him. But here's the thing about that type of garbage saying, oh, we're going to create a cap on insulin. Here's an idea. How about you just get rid of big pharma, get rid of our health insurance, give everyone free health care, and then insulin would just cost what it costs. It would just cost a thing. It would just be $13. There'd be no 12 middlemen and one woman making some crazy amount of money to charge you up the ass for insulin. Do you see how that works? Because our system now is insanity. And instead of that, you get Democrats going, we're one day, possibly, I haven't done it 4 years in presidency, but I'll think about doing it next time, maybe going to do some cap on insulin costs, not on all the other medications that you're paying out the ass for, just on insulin. The price of insulin in the U.S. market has seen a staggering increase over the past 40 years. Since 1984, the prices of ordinary consumer goods have only risen by a little over double. So you would expect insulin to be the same. If prices on consumer goods have doubled, prices on insulin should double. Whereas the price of insulin has not doubled. It has multiplied by 14 times as much for insulin. And if you're Terrence Howard, you have no idea what that means because you don't like multiplication. Novo Nordisk's insulin, which rose from $40 in 2001 to $289 in 2018. Eli Lilly's, which rose from $21 to $275. and Sanofi, which rose from $35 to $270. Over the past decades, the production cost of insulin has not increased significantly. So the production costs haven't raised. It's just that they want to be richer. That's all it is. The cost of other categories are shockingly low, mostly just a few dollars or even just cents, not even enough to buy a fried chicken. I don't know why they threw that in. These are production costs. And insulin is not a new drug, so there's no R&D. There's no research going on. There's very low to non-existent production costs. And yet the prices have gone up by 14 times. It's all just money. Eli Lilly in 2023, Eli Lilly had total revenue of $34 billion. And their R&D spending was only $9 billion. Their net profit was $6 billion in 2022. In 2023, Novo Nordisk, which is one of the biggest insulin makers, had total revenues of $33.7 billion. So it's all just about them enriching themselves. By the way, when you're driving through somewhere and you see a house, you go, that's not a house, that's a fucking castle. That thing, no one has ever seen half of the rooms in that thing. That is ridiculous. Unless there are 900 people living in that house, there's no need for a house that large. If you see one of those houses, I'll tell you what it is. It's a higher up at a health, either a healthcare company or a big pharma company. That's who lives there. I'm not kidding. There's a lot of other people live there, like lobbyists and shit, like fucking Wall Street traders, but still. And so over in China, they've just cured diabetes. The U.S. is thinking about putting sanctions on them for it. Oh, we're so disgusting. We're just filled with sociopaths that just want you to stuck in misery so that they can make more money. That's what it is. At the heart of it, it's sociopaths. The numbers are that maybe even 5 or 10% of the population is sociopaths. And do all of them become the ruling elite? No. But those who do become the ruling elite are. It's a lot easier to rise up the ranks when you do not give a shit about other human beings at all. At all. So, American of Color said psycho passing. I like that. Maybe I'll start using that. Sociopassing. Where they pretend to be normal human beings. Okay, I got to wrap up this show. I'm way over, but I hope you will come to the Los Angeles show, July 11th. I hope you will become a member over at leecamp.net. Leecamp.net is my locals page. Scroll down to become a subscriber. I'm also, if you're one of those people that's just into Patreon, you're like, I'm not using anything other than Patreon. Patreon's my thing. Fair enough. Patreon.com/LeeCamp. Become a member over there. Also, I have a new TikTok page, Hidden Truth, HIDDENTROOTH. Misspelled it. Thank you, Kovar, for telling me I got a great show. All right, folks, I will see you tomorrow. I do this 4 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 4 times a week. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, you know what? Never mind. I got another segment for you. I was going to do a comedy segment for you. It'll just take a minute. Why not? Almost forgot to do it. I'll wrap up with this. You get a little bonus. I'm calling this Final Thoughts. This is definitely comedy. So for those of you just tuning in right now and you're like, I don't like with the funny, this is a comedy segment. And we'll see if you guys like it. Maybe I'll do a few more of these. If you guys despise it, that's a hateful spider is what that is. It's something's despited. But if you hate it, then I won't do it anymore. No, that's the thing. If you hate it, I might still do it. Okay, here we go. Final thoughts. You know what I love about the New York Times? If you ever go to the front page of the New York Times, now I have a subscription because I have to use it on the show. I don't like giving them my money. So luckily I'm not. My dad got a free, it doesn't matter. He got a free subscription because he bought it for someone else because he's a lunatic and he reads the New York Times. Anyway, he used the free subscription to give to me, which means I can now show it to you on my show, which is good. Anyway, side note. But if you ever go to the front page of the New York Times, and I'm talking about their website, not the toilet paper, okay? I don't pick up the physical New York Times. I'm not Amish, all right? I am Mennonite, actually. And it's a completely different thing. Yeah, but I'm not actually sure how they're different, but I'm only Mennonite. But I'm sure one of the groups doesn't shave their bush. I think that's the difference. Is that the difference? And that's not sexist, by the way. I meant man bush, okay? I am talking the bro bush, okay? One of the two groups, Amish or Mennonite, one is not allowed by God to clean it up down there. I don't know why. The other group shaves it into the shape of a butter churn, actually. That's the one I'm in. That's how you can tell the difference. It's one of them shaved in the shape of a butter churn. I don't know how you get access. That's kind of difficult. It's kind of, sometimes you got to tell them that you have some syrup for sale. That's the only way those dirty gates will open. Where was I? Back to New York Times. The New York Times. You know what I love about the front page on their website? I swear to God, it's always like this. It will have two big stories. It'll go, breaking, 100 children blown to pieces. And then breaking, the world is heating up and all the birds are falling out of the trees just straight from the sky. And then they're hitting the monkeys on the head. So the monkeys are dying too. So all the birds and monkeys are dead. And then the third story, it's absolutely, those two are horrific. And then the third story off to the side of the page, but equal set of heading though, equal size. Third story will be breaking. Here's how to make homemade sprinkles for an elderly uncle on his birthday. And I just, how do you, or it's like, here's how to pack your toothbrush so it doesn't rub against the inside of your bag on a trip. And like, to see those headlines next to each other, it feels like you woke up, noticed the state of the world, and then took 3 shots of absinthe and 2 MDMA. Who the fuck can process a world like that? Who just sees those? What? Just breaking. U.S. unleashes new bomb just made of burning acid. Breaking. All the fresh water will be gone in 2 months. Breaking. Did you ever think caramel could be used on Brussels sprouts? What is the New York Times audience that makes, is it exclusively schizophrenics? Who the fuck signs up for that? It's like someone is wiping their ass with your frontal lobe, is what it feels like. And it hurts, and you're never the same. Never. I had to get that out of those are my final thoughts. I had to get that out of my chest. Okay. If you like final thoughts, let me know. If you like a little comedy, it's kind of like the third story in the New York Times. It'll help you digest the rest of what you saw for the hour. All right. I'll see you all tomorrow. 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Keep fighting.